it's natural to want to just make ourselves feel better by saying, oh, it can't be that bad. No, it can be. We need to be very clear-eyed about how serious this is, and how threatening and the damage, whatever the daily stuff is, it's all real. But that worries me. But I would say my answer is I'm resolute.
And we're going to be dancing into Rise Up Democracy. Yes, it's a perfect song. This is composed by friends of the Friday Power Lunch, Roger Bruno, Ellen Schwartz, and Margot Schleppart. So let's play. Let's get ready. Dance in.
So much is wrong in this world, but I believe we can make it right.
Woo! All right. We're so glad you're here, and happy Valentine's, everybody. I'm so happy to start off Friday with everybody in this room, Be Mine Democracy, and having David Pepper with us. I can't think of a better guest to really embrace all the concepts around democracy and freedom. So we're so glad to have David in the room. But let's get started, because some of you are new, and I want to say that, what really occurs to me when I think about what's happening, and this is why we picked this Rise Up song, is that it really is about us rising up together. And that is where I think, with everything going up, that makes me sort of keep holding on, understanding that as a people, democracy relies on us, and we're definitely, all of us are rising up together. We are definitely stronger. And as we the people, that's how the preamble starts. So we know that that is actually a signal to us that we need to hit the streets. We really need to show up. And what I've been loving to see is our elected holding town halls across the country. We just had several in Virginia. Jennifer McClellan just held one with tens of thousands of people on the line. People are worried. People are rising up. And truthfully, that is the key, is that we have to keep pushing. So that's why we know that every Friday we keep pushing in the room with good guests and just great people and great information. So thank you for coming. I want to do a special Valentine's Day shout out. I received a Valentine's in the mail for one of our members of the Friday Power Lunch. I want to say thank you for showing some love today. This is from Kimberly Rodler. She, if you've seen her on the Friday Power Lunch, she comes in the after chat. She has great creations, and it's Craft Creations Card Company. And what I loved is inside, she also sent these little messages like kind actions, make a difference, humanity, dignity, honesty, open hearts, mercy. So I challenge you today on Valentine's Day that we really do show the love for the warriors out there doing the work. Call a friend, people that you know that just really would love to have that little act of kindness that I think separates us, that makes us different, is that ability for humanity, dignity, what we care about. Call your elected that's been fighting. Send that love. Send a Valentine. Make a call, send a card, drop something off for your neighbor. This is what we need to do. This is what makes us really a great country and democracy. It really counts on us. So let's go ahead. We're going to start the first segment with Fennell Norton.
Thank you. Everybody knows that I love Frederick Douglass, and so today I am going to give our Black History moment again to Frederick Douglass, but this time it's going to be with footnotes by Dr. Jamar Tisby, and I'll give you all information on him. So here we go with today's Black History moment. We're going to celebrate the work of Dr. Jamar Tisby, who writes about the true stories of people of faith, justice, and resistance. Today, we shall once again revel in the legacy of my favorite writer and abolitionist, Frederick Douglass. He is one who used the power of the pen and his thundering voice to promote democracy. Frederick Douglass stands as the most well-known abolitionist of the 19th century. His daring escaping the dehumanizing agony of slavery made him a household name and my most fascinating person in history. Frederick Douglass did not just talk about his experience, but he also did it with a boldness and clarity that feels like thunder screaming at me. In 1883, a man wrote to Frederick Douglass asking him about his position on the colored question and voting. Frederick Douglass's words reveal a clear-eyed, pragmatic approach to politics that many Black Americans have displayed since at least the passage of the 15th Amendment in 1870 that granted Black men the right to vote. The political calculations Black people have had to make in the United States offer perspective for the current political climate. You can insert any wedge issue that you like. Our nation just stood on the precipice of deciding between an autocratic white Christian nationalist government, oops, or the few, for the few, or a participatory multiracial democracy for the many. Frederick Douglass will serve as a wake-up call for some and for our times. It is critical to remember that the Democratic and Republican parties underwent a platform realignment in the 20th century. The original references in this archival letter were written to preserve history and its accuracy, but today I change them for the ease and clarity of the modern day positions of each. For a thorough account of the political party realignment, you can read Princeton historian Dr. Kevin Kruse. So first, here we go. Douglass addresses the buzz that followed his comments at a recent colored convention in Louisville, Kentucky. He gave a speech which was titled, "Why Hold a Colored Convention?" In the letter, Frederick Douglass explains that he is a political independent. He maintains his right to speak up against either party, but he is an independent who supports the Democratic Party. This happened in Washington, D.C., October 3rd, and he says, "I see my views at the Louisville Colored Convention is variously commented upon. I am thought to be an independent, and so I am, but I am an independent inside of the Democratic Party. I can have all the independence I want inside the Democratic Party. I am both independent and dependent. I don't take a step in life that I'm not dependent on somebody or something. In politics, I am dependent upon the other political party, and I'm not foolish enough to think that the Democratic Party may as safely be trusted with the destiny of the Republic and the rights of the colored people as the Republican Party. And in this, I know I'm right." And he goes on with scathing candor to explain why he thinks it would be foolish to support a political party bent on turning back the racial progress of the nation and reinstating white supremacy to its fullest forms. Again, you can insert any issue you like. History lessons are a beautiful thing. But he goes on to say, "For the life of me, I cannot see how any honest colored man who has brains enough to put two ideas together can allow himself under the notion of independence to give aid and comfort to the Republican Party in Ohio or elsewhere." Frederick Douglass knew, as most Black people know today, that neither party offers a satisfying solution in the inequalities and victimizations Black people face, or today any marginalized community. But the fact that both parties are inadequate in certain respects does not mean that each party is equally harmful. If Black people supported the political party that overtly appealed to white supremacy and sought to regain an imagined ideologic past, then they would be counted, according to Frederick Douglass, as sabotaging ignoramuses. Ooh, woe to the colored people of the country when the Democratic Party shall triumph in spite of the treacherous votes of colored man. Bad as our condition is now, it would be worse then. We should neither have nor deserve the confidence of any party. And to use a slang phrase, he said, we'd be out in the cold. Frederick Douglass points the way forward in politics that you have to get the person in office and then you work with them. You are then accountable to put pressure on them to better serve the people. He says, "My advice to colored men everywhere is to stick to the Democratic Party. Tell your wants, hold the party up to its profession, but do your utmost to keep it in power, state and nation." If you look at today and the elections past, many people tied themselves in knots with tension over the presidential election. And there's going to be many more elections to come, whether it be Gaza, pro-choice, whether it be LGBT, immigration. We are always going to have to choose between two candidates. neither of whom will represent all of our values completely. It's nothing new. And we can't allow excuses to withdraw from the political process. Frederick Douglass knew that in a binary political system, there would only be one party who would be more clear toward racial progress and more unity than the other. For him, there was no question about which party to support. So I would say political options today remain as binary and clear as they were those 140 plus years ago. So when people say to you, I can't vote for either party, you can say what Frederick Douglass says, what I'll say. For the life of me, I cannot see how any honest person who has brains enough to put two ideas together can allow himself under the notion of independence to give aid and comfort to the Republican Party. In fact, both parties may be inadequate in certain respects, but that does not mean that they are equally harmful. So please don't make me call you a sabotaging ignoramus. Oh, sorry, that was my Frederick Douglass opinion. I hope you enjoyed it. You can read more about Frederick Douglass and his wife, Anna Marie Douglass, in Dr. Jamar Tisby's latest book, The Spirit of Justice. And now I hand it over to Louisa.
Okay, great. Thank you, Fana. I just want to say thank you for that spotlight. And Louisa, I want to give her some justice in introducing her because at the top of the hour, I did not mention that today I'm so excited to have Lisa Borowski with us. She is our fearless leader of the Grassroots Coalition. And I am so excited to call her in the room and say, Happy Valentine's Day, my friend. And let's spotlight her if we can and bring her up. There you are.
It's great to see you. Happy Valentine's Day.
Valentine's Day. I'll let you go at it. There's so much to talk about. Thank you so much for being in the room.
Definitely. Yeah, we have a big update from what's been happening during our legislative session. So I think I'm going to start there. Great news is we've had a lot of success with calls to action again this year. We are hearing from legislators how important they are. So you'll probably hear from us again for the next week and a half. We're in session until the 24th. So please continue to take action. It's really helping make a difference and move the needle on some of these important bills. First thing to note is that our 3 constitutional amendments have passed both of our chambers, which was our biggest goal for this session. So very excited. Additionally, in some cases, they've passed with more Republican support than we thought. So the marriage equality constitutional amendment was approved 58 to 33. Which is great. We had 7 Republicans vote yes on it and 9 who basically abstained by not being present for that vote. Restoring the right to vote picked up 4 Republican votes in the House, and it was a party line vote in the Senate. And then, not surprisingly, on our reproductive rights amendment, it passed, but only with Democratic support. So if you have any questions about who cares about a women's right to choose, it is very obvious which is that party, and that we need to make sure that we are electing all of our leaders again so they can pass these constitutional amendments next year. Also, really good report on criminal justice reform legislation. This year, we're seeing more bipartisan cooperation on these issues than we have in the last 3 sessions. So, for example, on the record sealing bill, youth shackling, and mental health bills, all of those bills received bipartisan support. And then there's an overwhelming grassroots response against the mass surveillance bill, which is not completely dead, but looks to be dead. They received 12,000 emails from grassroots supporters. So your voice matters. They were not sure that bill was going to be killed, and people changed their vote after getting those emails from us. So really, really important. There are a couple of issue areas where we aren't doing as well, and so some of that action is now moving from legislation to the budget. One of those areas is public education, and I'll put a link in the chat to an updated article from For Public Education going into more detail. But basically, they say of the 6 priority bills they were working on, only 2 crossed over to the other chamber, and of those 2, only 1 is still being considered in the General Assembly. And this is providing funding for a restorative schools program. I'm going to put that call to action in the chat. Please take actions while you're sitting and listening during the rest of the power lunch. It's a great way to multitask and have your voice heard. Another area that we are looking to have some budget action because the bills did not go through is the data centers. And then we also have some budget action on Medicaid expansion because there is a concern that if federal funding is cut off, Virginia does not have the funding capability at the moment to fund that gap. So there's some important conversations around that. All of these will be put in the chat as calls to action. So please make sure to take those actions. Secondly, we are also tracking federal calls to action because of the new administration. So if you haven't been following those can be found on the Virginia Grassroots Coalition website and continue to be updated by our rapid response team, who has been really fantastic, not only trying to keep on top of all of these actions, but also vetting them. And I do want to note, please make sure before you're posting calls to action to make sure they're coming from a trusted, reliable source. There are folks, rightly so, who are reading articles, getting concerned, and kind of creating their own CTAs. The challenge with that is sometimes they're not thinking longer term about how maybe taking the action today might lead to some unintended consequences down the road. And we want to make sure we're really thinking that through, especially related to our federal workers who are all very, very stressed and trying as best they can to protect themselves, but we need to make sure that we're not putting them in any more danger than they already are in. So next time I join you on the Power Lunch, we will be transitioning to talk about the 2025 elections, which I'm very excited about. You may be hearing that the Democratic Party of Virginia has elections coming up. We are watching that process. It is somewhat of a black box that we are trying to uncover. So more information will be coming on that front. There is going to be a big reorg of the state party next year. And so we are trying to figure out the best way to make sure that grassroots positions and viewpoints are heard during that process. And then the last thing I want to share is that I went to the theater last night and I saw Walk at Woolly Mammoth, which is about gun violence prevention. And this play is fantastic. It's really like a love letter from two parents to their son, Joaquin, who was a young activist and was killed during the Parkland school shooting on Valentine's Day in 2018. So this is a really important day to remember that, but also if you are someone who is active on this issue, and if you're someone who's not active on this issue, think about joining and signing up for information on ways to get involved on gun violence prevention. We are seeing small, steps in the right direction, but there's just so much more we can be doing. And just was a really good reminder for me about that at the play last night. So.
No, that's wonderful. That is really a great reminder about today. I really appreciate you bringing that into the room. And I think it is a great day to just remember, just to show a lot of love and kindness and humanity, especially when it just seems an onslaught of so much crazy that all of us activists are just trying to combat. So thank you, Louisa, for bringing that love in the room. And I look forward to more updates. So thanks so much. I am excited too to bring some love in the room. Ohio friend David Pepper is here. We're going to do a little love note. Be mine, democracy. I just want to I want to start out with just something personal. I mean, your whole life you've been a fighter of democracy. This is what you've written about, what you have served in your state of Ohio. I mean, personally, really in this moment, what are you feeling? I mean, I know, what is really impacting you the most? And then we can just talk about all the crazy stuff, but I'm just,
Sure.
are you holding up?
I got an email from a friend days after the election, and she asked me the same question. Was I scared? What was I feeling? And I took a long time to answer it because she was scared and I wanted to address it. Yeah, the word, it's going to sound a little bit academic. The word I use, the honest truth is we all need to be very wide-eyed and clear about the risk.
Mhm.
History tells us that when you're not, that's when you make the biggest mistake. When people, it's natural to want to just make ourselves feel better by saying, "Oh, it can't be that bad." No, it can be. We need to be very clear-eyed about how serious this is, and how threatening and the damage, whatever the daily stuff is. It's all real, but that worries me. But I would say my answer is I'm resolute
Mhm.
because of a number of things. One thing that we all need to see is that what we are in now is the same battle this country has always been in. We are in a long battle for democracy. We're not the first generation, although maybe we thought we were, that just didn't have to worry about democracy. That was a very privileged and naive view for those who had it. And maybe since John Lewis and the Warren Court, it felt like everything was safe. But John Lewis would say, don't you dare assume that. So we're in the same struggle that we've always been in. And I love that we heard from Frederick Douglass earlier, because the truth is, the reason we are where we are is people before us who faced worse circumstances than we do now strived and succeeded. The suffragists, Frederick Douglass, John Lewis. Yes, things are tough now. The risks are clear. Some are paying a real price for it, but people with a worse place to begin with than we are in now, who faced violence that, knock on wood, most don't face right now, although there's a risk of it we should take seriously. They overcame it. So for goodness sakes, we can as well. And one other thing here, history tells us very clearly that moments of darkness like this, where those who don't want a diverse democracy have some momentum, that's kind of what this is part of, right?
Mhm.
They can either last for a couple years or generations, like Jim Crow. And what determines often if these dark moments last just a couple years or generations is what we do right now. If we allow what's happening to settle in as the new normal, so people forget what we all had only a few years ago, and young people like those my kids' age don't ever know it can be better, the risk is that a few years of darkness become decades, because it settles in and people don't even know that not that long ago it was different. They assume that our government is run by billionaires and racists like Donald Trump. We have to fight now, because if we're successful, which we can be in Virginia in 25, across the country in 26, and do it again in 28, if we're successful near term, we can stop the risk that this settles in for decades. If we lose energy, which clearly your group is not doing, if we lose energy and don't fight back now, the risk is all that we're feeling and facing lasts a lot longer. That's all on us right now. I'll stop talking, and
Right.
I know you know this, but I just want to make sure others see it as well.
I agree. You know, I remember when we talked several times, but one thing that always stuck in my head after we really talked about laboratories of autocracy, when you exposed all that, is you warned about where we were in history, and we could be heading into this Jim Crow era, just like, you know, the late 1890s, you saw that coming, and the changes that lasted decades, right?
Yeah.
So I so appreciate that. And it was something that always kind of centered my understanding of where we were in the moment. So I appreciate that. Well, you've been writing a lot on Pepper Perspectives, and you've just been really watching what's happening. So let's go there. What's on your, let's start with what's really on your top priority mind right now. I mean, you've written around, we talked about J.D. Vance and his deciding that maybe he wasn't going to follow the rule of law. Do you want to start with what that is about and that challenge, and what your thoughts are that as a lawyer, what you're seeing even now and the reaction to it?
Yeah, I mean, first, let's give a lot of credit that lawyers, Democracy Docket, Mark Elias, and others um, did plan ahead. I mean, they are taking on numerous cases and thus far winning almost everything. The executive orders are clearly largely illegal. They violate powers of Congress. They violate other rules like the Privacy Act. All of us have a right to privacy. That Treasury Secretary looks like he probably violated that when he gave up access to Doge. Others, I think, are being scared from doing this. So the good news is we're winning, and we're winning with Reagan appointees and Obama appointees, and even I think a Trump appointee. And I think, one thing though that this shows is I think Trump knows a lot of this stuff is really unpopular. That's why he's not trying to get Congress to do it.
Right.
He's doing it through executive order. Some of this stuff, if you think USAID is wasteful, well, Congress can have a hearing about it. But he's
Right.
skipping over, and that's the way our Constitution works. They're the ones who are supposed to decide upon spending. I think a lot of this stuff is he's trying to get around the fact that I don't think Congress would go along with a lot of this stuff, and that's one reason I think he's breaking the law. So the good news is we're winning the court orders. But as someone just asked, yes, the risk is, and Vance hinted at this in one tweet. Others are do they just up and violate court orders? And that's a risk. And whenever people say, oh, they wouldn't do that, I'm like, when's the last time that worked out that we thought that? So
Yeah.
we could be facing yeah, it is scary stuff, Rachel. We could be facing a moment, I wrote this the other day, where we almost face a second Marbury v. Madison. The case that gave courts the power to oversee, review both executive and congressional action. This could end up being the Supreme Court having to say, again, sorry, you don't get to do this. I don't think all justices will agree with that. I don't sit around and hold my breath for John Roberts to save the day anymore. But I do
Right.
think at a certain point, I hope that there are at least 5 that would say you must do this, and these actions don't have legal import, and you can't act upon them. But yes, that is one of the big trend is they are losing every court case, and there has
Right.
been a effective challenge of almost all the executive orders. And that does lead to, as people are asking, that ultimately could lead to a showdown. Yeah, they have every right to appeal losses. They don't have a right to defy orders. They have been defying, as someone just suggested. They defied, I think, the NIH order, it looked like. So that could ultimately be a showdown at the court. And my hope is that we get the right outcome. We'll see what happens.
Well, yeah, just recently, I think everybody saw yesterday with the Eric Adams case where the DOJ wanted them to just sort of drop all those charges, and we saw some action there. What was your thoughts on that when we see the prosecutors in New York, and then, of course, Bondi's thrown down court cases and suing people, but on that legal side of it, for the prosecutors showing that kind of courage or just
Yeah. It's clearly quid pro. I mean, it's just so corrupt. It's unbelievable. Hey, we'll drop the charges if you fulfill our policy agenda. I'm torn, Catherine, because I so respect people who refuse to do the wrong thing, and they should not do the wrong thing. But whenever people resign, I know they're going to be replaced by someone who will do the wrong thing. So if there are ways to stay, like after remember the fork in the road email that told federal workers to leave? My subsect the next day was, do not resign. They
yeah,
want you to resign because they know it's hard to get rid of you through the legal process. There are challenges, there are costs. So I understand resigning. I'm not in their shoes, so I don't want to even undermine the righteousness of what they're doing. But the next person that Trump will put in there will not do the right thing, and I hate the trade. Let's put it that way. Um, I just hate the trade.
about Christopher Wray that he went out early. I felt
Yeah,
like
like that made it easy. That made it easy. The showdown in this moment, and I'm going to quote Frederick Douglass because I love that you read that was read. Here's what Frederick Douglass said at the July 4th speech. You remember he spoke to women in, I think, Rochester on July 4th. And he was asked, and this is relevant to this question. He said, I think some in the audience probably are thinking, couldn't you argue more and denounce less? Couldn't you be more persuasive and rebuke less? Your cause would be so much more likely to succeed if you were a little more polite, was what he said. I know the audience is thinking that. And what he said was, no, sometimes it is not light that is needed, but fire. It is not the gentle shower, but thunder. We need the storm, the whirlwind, and the earthquake. The feeling of the nation must be quickened. The conscience of the nation must be roused. The propriety of the nations must be startled. Meaning, sometimes that showdown is
is
what
what
wakes people up. And so,
yeah,
again, I'm not undermining those, but the Wray is a good example. Christopher Wray saying, I'm sorry, this is an appointment by years. You don't get to pick the FBI director, and I'm going to stand and fight. I may lose. That showdown will do more to awaken the American people than leaving, having
agree.
some interim, and then throwing Kash Patel to get affirmed. So sometimes I think the showdown, people on the streets, as John Lewis always kept urging people to do, does
Yes.
more than like kind of going along and even resigning.
I think why make it easy? Throw the
Yes.
sand in. And I think at first, and my feeling is as you know, people felt like, well, we lost this election. As good Democrats were like, okay, now it's your turn. But we went into that with that idea that maybe it was going to be bad, but not that bad. And I think people now are really kind of waking up to it, because I'm sure Christopher Ray may, like right now, be saying I should have stayed. We have, like, my neighbors are FBI agents, and Pam Bondi is the one that they disbanded the unit investigating oligarchs, right? I mean, this
Yeah.
is what's going on. And I think the personal stories are getting out there now. And I think also one way, David, is that we're telling people, the more you share what's happening in your personal life, that you can talk to people, the more then I think everybody's paying attention. So I think
Yeah.
that's important.
There's also an issue around messaging.
Yes, let's go
We
at it.
say it's terrible, but we act normal. The people who aren't sure who's right think it must not be terrible because we're not acting like it's terrible. If Christopher Wray thinks it was illegal to get rid of him early, then he needs to act like he thinks it's illegal. And if you walk away, then you don't. So if there's an inconsistency between what we say and how we act, those who are literally confused, as Trump wants them to be, about which is legal and which isn't, they will read more into our actions and they'll assume, well, they're not. Most people think, well, if I was being treated illegally, I would do something about it. And so I think that the actions end up being part of our message. And if we're too, like Frederick Douglass said, if we're too polite about it, if we just sort of comply in advance, then a lot of people, when they think it must not be that bad, or they wouldn't act that way.
No, I agree with you. And I think that we're in this room, everybody is like, yes, yes, yes. A few more things I'd like to talk about too is, we've seen the purges, of course, we see the FBI, all this happening. Now the Department of Education, which I don't know if you listened to Linda McMahon and that hearing the other day. I had some concerns. Let's go with education and universities. You wrote about that, sort of the secret dark thing it's going
Yeah.
on. Let's just go back to Thomas Jefferson talking about keeping Americans educated really helps us understand our government, how laws work, and if you keep people ignorant, right? So this attack on education, undermining universities, it feels like just so purposeful. But what is your take on what you're seeing, and what kind of, you put a dark lens on some of that activity that you were really trying
Yeah,
to.
I mean, I'll share it for those who are interested, but so the NIH cuts are horrific in and of their own right. I mean, they literally are attacking all sorts of research that's saving lives, it's extending lives. Um, but the huge target of those NIH cuts will be the UVA, Ohio State, UC, Stanford, Michigan, Alabama. It's the universities. And that's not an accident. This is partly about research and science. But when I wrote the thing here, I went through a speech that J.D. Vance gave a few years ago. Some of you will have seen it. I had not watched it in full. It's like right out of Hungary and Orban. Universities are the enemy. Professors are the enemy. We must use all power to destroy universities, or our ideas will never succeed, is essentially what he said. This is an absolute war on higher ed, and whether it's cutting off the funding that makes all the science happen, or whether it's what's happening in Ohio right now, which is the anti-DEI stuff turns into basically censorship of the humanities, attacking professors. And another one, they're going to attack endowments. J.D. Vance, as a senator, put in a bill to multiply by 20 times how endowments are taxed. This is a full-out assault, and it's ideological. And you're from Youngstown. The same story with, they're replacing academics with partisan hacks to run universities. They did it in Youngstown. They did it in Florida. The Liberties, whatever they call the one school down there. This is not just about NIH and research, and that's bad enough. It's about a much bigger attack on the entire university and college system. We know, and by the way, as bad as this all is, and it's bad, and it will stop some of it, I hope, I also think it's very dangerous politics for them, because when you start attacking UVA in Alabama and Ohio State, you're going to the heart of these communities in these states. And I think in your elections in 25 and ours in 26, we got to get really Frederick Douglass like on just how damaging attacks on these crown jewels of our states are. And I think that's how we actually reverse this in upcoming elections, by making it clear about what this is about and the damage it's doing.
Yeah, I mean, the word, and we've been talking about this, Fennell Norton has been leading on the diversity, equity, and inclusion, making them say the actual word instead of the DEI slur, right? But what we're seeing it even at the FCC, and how Musk is using it in AI to go through everything to sort of just get rid of everything. They're using it to target and fire everybody. But it's weird because they say we want free speech, but yet they're just saying you're not allowed to talk about anything. So it is really it's chilling, and I think we do definitely have to stand up with that. So lastly, I know we're getting up to time here. Anything else on your mind that you want to leave the room with? I know that we had talked about Ken Martin, our own party chair organization, where maybe you are on that, or just, that would be one interesting thing to talk about as well, how our party's doing.
Sure. So I actually think that all three people running for the national chairmanship are good. Ken Martin's done this work for years. He's been very effective in Minnesota. Ben
Right.
Wickler was very effective in Wisconsin. So I don't know if it got nasty or not. My attitude was always, these are good leaders. They're going to do a good job. Ken Martin is a great communicator. I think if he came to Virginia, you'd be surprised by the fire in his speech. So good news there. And they all kind of believe in the 50 state, let's run everywhere strategy. So that's good. The thing I'd close on is, when we won Ohio in 2008 and Obama won the White House in Virginia and Florida, they thought the Republican Party was going to go extinct. There was literally a Time magazine cover with an elephant on it saying extinction. Karl Rove, pains me to say this, he went to the state level and he started running for state house seats all over the country. He wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal in March of 2010 saying, we're going to win by winning Portsmouth, Ohio. And he named a bunch of areas. It's exactly what happened in 2010, November. We saw it. We felt it. When we lost in 2004, what did Howard Dean do? He did a 50-state strategy, ground up, state house up. When the parties out of power want to come back, there's a very clear pattern. If you want to do it, you go broader and you go deeper, and you start at the state house. And with every state house race, like we've already seen in special elections since Trump won, we are seeing victories already. And so the reason I'm excited to talk to Virginia folks is you're next. And your elections between now and November can literally be the first opportunity to have a massive pushback on what's happening. And when we've come back bigger picture, this has always been where it started. So your energy, and I love the update, but your energy for the 25 elections, running everywhere, like you've done a much better job than 10 years ago, running in more places. We've seen North Carolina had a good year overall because they did. If we get on the ground and show how overreaching they are, and we have candidates running across Virginia, you can become one of the first places where that comeback starts. And school boards too in 25. I completely agree, Karen. It's going to be school board, local, and the states that have state house elections is where our pushback begins. And so I'm excited to work with you between now and November to make sure we take advantage of that.
I love it. And
David,
it's true.
David, I wanted to, sorry, I'm jumping in, but okay, so I want to just talk, I want to start even lower than state houses because we're trying to develop the grassroots infrastructure here. That is what we are doing. So in terms of the statewide level and the party level, who's going to start listening to us? When does that start happening? Because really that's what we need to be doing, because grassroots organizing is 365. We don't follow the campaign calendar, and they do not engage us outside of Labor Day to Election Day.
Well, my hope is that, if that hasn't happened with your old chair, you're about to have an election for a new chair. I think Ken Martin sees that. But I agree. I mean, whether you're a formal member of the local party or you're part of this group, the way we turn this around is in Ohio, we call them precincts, precinct captains, precinct executives, whatever they are there, they need to own the precinct. That's where it all starts. This is my precinct, and I knock on doors here all the time, not just at the end. The door knock week to go, the neighbor should say, well, thanks for coming by, but I've been talking to my precinct executive for a year. I got it. I know all this stuff. That has to be our mindset. And if this is going to sound nuts, but if 40% of precinct captains in America took that on, we'd win all over.
Yep. I
Forty
love it.
percent, let alone 80%, because it's too often happening. So yeah, I agree with you. That is where it all starts. That leads to better organizing, better turnout, and much better messaging because it's coming from within and not from on top.
Yeah, I just want to just say that is absolutely what we're trying to focus on. The good news is that you get it. I hope that Ken Martin gets it, and I hope that our new state DPVA chairperson gets it as well. Because one of the things is we still hear a lot from, folks who are who do all the donations, still talk about elections that matter or seats that matter, and they all matter. And I just
Yeah.
wish and hope that they start to change that language. And I don't know what thoughts you have on that, but
That's why I always say when you want to look at where the comebacks happened, it happened at the local and state level. That's where they start.
That's
That's where it
very
started.
fair.
It
Thank
didn't start. Yeah, Karl Rove when they lost didn't say, "Hey, let's go after Obama in 12." He said, "Let's go local," and he went to places that they had just lost. He didn't give up on them, and
I love
we need to see that we need to do the same thing. And again, you're next up, which is I think great because there's a lot of potential in Virginia.
Let me just say that we're ready and I'm so glad you'll be helping us with that. And I'm saying that we're just moving forward. And I want you to stay if you can stay in the room because Carrie, what's up next? I think you'll be so interested to hear from Carrie Short. She's our coastal anchor. She's also a leader of the COVA Coalition down in Virginia Beach area. She has a playbook she's going to share that she's put together. It's a project by the COVA Coalition called the Action for the Grassroots. So Carrie, take it away. And David, if you can stick around. Yeah, thank you.
Suddenly, I feel right on time. Okay. So I did not publish an amazing book like David Pepper because I love that democracy book of his. Ours is 8 pages, but I'm going to just quickly go over it because we don't have a ton of time. That's kind of where we're starting. It's based on some of the organizing we did in 2017, where we really learned how to become grassroots organizers. And I kind of tested some of this out on Susan LaBandabar. So if she's with us today. I tested out some of these coalition building strategies with her. But this playbook is for building a coalition and also building small community circles in your neighborhood. It works both the same way. There's a ton of like what to do now out there in Substack. You can bring that back up, Dennis. You can just rotate through while I'm talking. They don't need to see me. We just kind of see all these what to do now on Substack. They're everywhere. And I just kind of wanted to address it from what our experiences were. So we came up with a somewhat 10-step plan and we're calling it the playbook. And number one thing on there is call it a regime. Every time you hear the media talking about authoritarian regimes outside of the United States of America, they seem to be quite comfortable calling it a regime. And that's exactly what we have with this administration. The second point is to be brave. And we heard that talking to your friends requires bravery. It's the hardest, high risk, high engagement thing you can do. And you know what? It takes a long time. So we have to be brave to do this. Step 3 is to influence outside of our silos. Boy, did we hear this after the election. We want to start organizing. We want to start communicating. We need to create our own media strategy. Really, it's like eat less, move more when you need to lose weight. We all know what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to do relational organizing, and it is so hard. And we have to commit to influencing outside of our silo. And I think a big way to do that is to stop posting. Because all it does is it creates an echo chamber. Whereas when you look at relational organizing, it creates empathy. So we really have to think about those two things. They both have their place, but we have been spending way too much time posting about stuff and not actually building the relationships that are going to last. So that's a big part of step 3, influencing outside of our silos. Then we have talked so much about messaging. So step 4 is to commit to communication that is consistent and unified. This is where the coalitions come together. We decide what our messaging is and we stick with it. It's unified. We are effective. And I go through that a little bit in the playbook about what a lot of folks have told us, what they consider to be effective communication, staying on brand, being consistent, using active voice. We can't say things are being cut. Someone is cutting them, and we need to make sure that we're directly relating that through active voice. We need to turn things into attacks. That's very strategic. So we have to be very strategic. We need to be professional, and we need to appeal to people outside of our silos without abandoning our values. So we have a lot of tips in this playbook that we've been vetting through our own coalition about things that we have heard, things that we have tried that I think will basically enhance our communication strategies. I mentioned briefly practicing this relational organizing. Again, it is a big investment of time, but I think it's the only way we'll be effective, and that's turning our friends into activists. And then we really need to be hyper local, and that's why I'm so glad David Pepper mentioned the precincts. We want to own our precincts. We want to know who is in our precinct. We want to be our precinct captain or learn who our precinct captains are. We need to own it. My husband, when we started Covo Coalition 2 years ago, and Heidi and I started it, my husband was like, I feel like you're running for office. You're like shaking hands and kissing babies. And that's what I was doing. I was like everywhere trying to meet people and be in my precinct and know who all the captains were, know my whole organization. So be hyper local. We go to civic league meetings. We're going to the PTA meetings. You've got to know who's there. If you don't have a friend in a nearby precinct, that's crucial. Make some friends. Find out who's there. We have 3 precincts in Norfolk, Virginia. Buckle up. 3 precincts in Norfolk, Virginia that voted for Trump. What? So we're going to be focusing on them. They're not my precincts, but I'm going to learn who lives there and how I can be effective. We need to be everywhere. This was super effective in 2017 with groups like Indivisible, who were trolling GOP members at their town halls. Next week, they're on recess. I know there's a lot of activities planned. We need to just have this appearance that we are everywhere. When we are contacting the offices, we need to be consistent, persistent. We need to be pains in the ass. We need to just be on top of them. We need to deploy our volunteers at all their different levels of comfort, because that'll super help. Not everyone wants to be out there on the sidewalk with a sign, but they can email. They can do the 5 calls app. They can do swipe left. They can help. So just tailor the activities toward the folks in your group. When it comes to money, I'm encouraging people to keep it local. Sorry, party officials. I want their money to do these low tech or no tech communication strategies, the yard signs, the billboards, the post-it notes, the postcards. Those are things that, guess who pays for them? We do. You know why? Because I've talked to campaigns to tell them that we were going to leaflet every door, and they looked at me like I was crazy because they had a list in van that they wanted us to follow, and we didn't want to follow it. So we did our own thing, and we leafleted every door. And guess what, friends? You don't have to pay for that list. All right. And then finally, coalitions stick together. That's the next step. We got each other's back. Down here in Hampton Roads, what was really effective is that we kind of split up. So for example, the Ocean View Alliance for Reproductive Rights, they took on Phil Hernandez's campaign. They did everything. When I needed to contact his campaign, I just went through OVAR because I knew that was their territory, so to speak. So we kind of divide and conquer, and that way we can really handle it. Take turns hosting each other. If you know there's another group in your community, you offer to host the event and then you invite them. So I know Heidi went out to Suffolk and helped them put together a postcard party. They had not done one. And now we have 3 leaders in Suffolk who want to be grassroots leaders. And then step 10 was, there is no step 10. There's no model for this. We're making it up as we go along, and that's the beauty of the grassroots. But we do commit to being professional and not waste our volunteers' time. So I just want to kind of get back to what Covo Coalition is doing with all of this, is that we took this playbook and we put it in sort of 2-month segments of how we're going to make it work. One of the biggest things that I'm imploring people to do, and we're doing this down here, is to start community circles. I don't want to offend anyone in the chat or anyone who is active in protest, in organizing protests. They have their place. But if you really want to make a lasting impact, start a community circle, start a new group. You can find people who are allies and get them to start a group. That I think is sort of a way that we can make a lasting impression, is getting them to start a group, and then we support them in starting their group. You guys hear me? I just want to make sure, because my AirPod just kind of made a funny noise.
Yes, we can hear you.
Am I good? Oh, fantastic. All right. I'm going to race through this. The calls to action. Louisa mentioned this. Covo Coalition is trying to vet the calls to action. And how do we do that? we go through the Virginia Grassroots website because they are amazing. And that's how we get our calls to action. But a lot of folks are confused. There's a lot of stuff out there and some of it is conflicting and our members don't know what to do. So we definitely vet those calls to action. We do the coalition building. If there's another organization out there, we're doing our best to find out who's running them and invite them to the table so that we can build our coalition of grassroots organizations in Hampton Roads. And then finally, another way that COVA Coalition is doing it is that we've established some committees. We have a truth bomb committee. They're in charge of content creation. They're doing the real research to put together these very simple, truthful, short truth bombs that we can sprinkle in social media, on yard signs, on billboards, on post-it notes. And we have that content committee, but then we have another communications committee that's actually going to help us get it out there, design the graphics, follow everything. Then we have a membership committee. You know, Network Nova is really great at saying thank you to their members and following up on people. But quite frankly, we're not always great at that. We have a bunch of people who will sign up and then they don't show up. But then do we call them and find out why they didn't show up? So we have a committee of membership folks who will be following and pulling all those threads. We have a big voter and education and registration effort in coastal Virginia.
I'm
with
sorry
COVA
to
Coalition.
interrupt, but I'm not sure the share is quite right.
Our little, yes, oh, there it is. Look, there's our truth bomb. And then finally, that's okay. I just wanted to mention, so there they are, the truth bombs, the content creators, communication, membership, voter education and registration, and leadership committees. So those are the committees that are working for us. So I'm just going to put them out there and recommend them for you. So again, we developed this little playbook. It's for both members of organizations plus the leaders of organizations who want to build coalitions. And so that's kind of it in a nutshell. I went real fast. I always talk kind of fast, but the idea then is to sort of give us this playbook because quite frankly, friends, it's very loud out there. And so we just tried to pull through some of it and put it together all in one place and make a resource for all of our grassroots friends. So that's it.
Okay, there you are. Why don't you come on? That was awesome. And so in the sense of getting hold of the playbook for people just to sort of look at, what do you want? How do you want to handle that?
We have it linked on we have a link that's probably been dropped in the chat. I didn't know if you guys want to share it freely. If we want it, we're going to, we didn't really talk about that. But there is a link. It should be in the chat. I created the link, and shared it with you guys. So, and we'll be sharing it to all of the coalition members of in COVA Coalition. So we have 8 groups met last Saturday to kind of refine this playbook. And so I've made it available to the leaders of those 8 groups. But there is a link in the chat. So you are welcome to take it and use it.
Okay, so Fennell, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think that it's fantastic. We've had a chance last year to try some of the things in the playbook that we were all having ideas about, so I think it's fantastic. I love it all. My favorite is probably step 10, which is everybody can take it and add things that are based on their own communities and what they know and what works. And so I think the biggest opportunity and the biggest the best thing about grassroots is that we have the ability to pivot. And some of the bigger organizations don't have the ability to do that. And so when you think about all that's happening, being able to pivot and move to your organization, to what's happening in your community and what's happening locally and nationally is one of the most important things. So it's fantastic.
No, and
we can be really, really nimble. And I think the other thing that has been very empowering for grassroots folks is that we can create our plan because we're 365 and it's our community. And I know a lot of us have expressed frustrations with organizers coming from outside of our community. But I mean, really, we need to create those structures for ourselves. We are highly structured. Just because we're grassroots doesn't mean we don't have structure. We're highly structured and we know what works. But really, we need to start these little groups all over the place. Everybody should be starting a little group. We're not competing with each other. We're supporting each other. The more, the merrier.
Because it's Valentine's Day and we all need to show the love. And I do so agree. And I'm going to say that what I've seen, even people in my neighborhood that starting a little group, and somebody reached out to me. So I think it's really important. And then, like you said, offering that support. I do want to say that we need to go to after chat soon, and I want to thank David Pepper. I'm not sure if he can stay with us, but if he can, if you don't know David Pepper, and we did introduce him at the top of the hour, but his 2 books are one of our favorites that we have always followed: The Laboratories of Autocracy and Saving Democracy. And Be Mind Democracy was really a great spotlight for David. So we're so glad he's here. And make sure you do follow him on his Substack, Pepper Perspectives. And it was great listening to Fennell with the Black History Spotlight. And Frederick Douglass is going to be definitely a guiding light. And lastly, with coastal anchor Carrie Short, I think in the sense of all leaders, this is about leadership right now. And I think working together and sharing our best practices and using information from other groups. We have people from California here. I got a note from Meg. Thank you, Meg, for reaching out to me. She was a little confused. Sometimes a sense some of our actions right now, when we talk about Virginia, talk about our legislature, we will be more clear so you understand some of the bills, some of the inside baseball. We have to remind ourselves on this show that we really are more descriptive about some of them. So thank you for that great reminder. And I'm going to say that next week, I am so excited. We'll have the governor that I hope she'll be the governor. Abigail Spanberger, who is running to be our governor, is going to be here along with the regional organizer for Indivisible, Jack Fain. And then we'll also have, we're going to have on, talking about data centers and energy, we're going to have Tim Sinwitsky and Paige Westlink from the Sierra Club, Virginia chapter. And I'm going to tell you, people, the data centers is existential threat to a lot of the energy and the issues, environmental concerns. So we are going to put those 3 together and rock the world with that. And if you're new to the room, we are going to go to the after chat where you'll get to share and talk. And if David's here, we'll just direct our first comments to him and support the show. Thank you to our patrons. And thank you to Kimberly Rodler. She's in the room. I think I saw her. Thank you for my Valentine. Will you be my Valentine, Kimberly? Anything else before we go to the after chat? Pink, we're going to ready?
Yeah, well, I did just want to also mention that the community circle guidelines from Covo Coalition is also in the chat.
I love the community circle. Let's do that. Hopefully we've earned your love, and I have some new patrons I can brag on next week. It really makes a difference in our work. So follow us on Substack, YouTube, and all that great stuff. And thank you to the team. Big hand for the team. I see you, Kimberly. I see you up there. Thank you to Laura. Thank you to Dennis. Thank you to Heidi. Stair. Robin's here today too. That's awesome. And everybody that puts the show together. Thank you so much. Let's roll credits. Want to get those up, Dennis? Let's roll.